Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. This is Adel Khan with SafePass. I have Emma with me as well. Today's topic is about GRC controls as part of the upgrade to 12.2 and beyond. So thanks, appreciate everybody joining. We're running a few minutes late. Apologies for that. We'll jump right into the topic today. Just a bit about SafePass introduction. So SafePass has been in the GRC space for the last 15 or so years. I've written a book on this topic, and we have educational outreach for customers, specifically Oracle customers that are interested in improving internal controls in their ERP systems. We're also recognized by Gartner and various other professional organizations in the internal audit and internal controls area. We had a recent event in Osaka where we introduced some new services and tools, and also we spoke on security here just earlier this month in London and got to meet some customers and partners. So basically that's our space. Today's topic is about how EBS R12.2 is impacting controls. What are some of the things in 12.2, what to look out for if you guys are using GRC today, and what are, most importantly, what are some of the upgrade considerations as you move to 12.2. I've also included a brief case study of customer that has upgraded to 12.2 recently, 12.2.9. So with that introduction, I'll just give you a brief background on us, which is some of our customers, you guys know that, and a quick overview of the product platform. So these are some of the key products. I won't get into the details. If you have questions, please reach out to Emma or us through our LinkedIn sites. And we monitor and respond quickly. So today we're going to basically talk about access management and continuous controls monitoring, which are the key areas where Oracle GRC provides value to you today. So let's take a look at R12, see what's happening in R12. If you think about the journey on R12, Oracle introduced 12.1 in 2009. It's been a 10-year process, and as a matter of fact, the latest release this year is 12.2.9. So this slide is a little dated. But basically, the premier support for 12.1 is ending in 2021. However, 12.2 will continue to 2030. So that's driving a number of our customers to plan as we enter the new year, plan their upgrades, and take advantage of some of the benefits that I'll touch on for 12.2. And obviously, staying compliant with the latest supported version is important for financial reporting, operations, and IT in general. So what are some of the enhancements that are driving our customers to upgrade, besides just the support issue? So there are a number of functional innovations, that you may want to evaluate as you consider move forward to create a higher return on investment than just the lift and shift, as we call it. So you'll have the ability to do more analysis, predictive analysis, which is what we're very excited about. We're building a number of services around that. The ability to extend some of your applications to cloud. So if you're not ready to move to the cloud, you may want to consider some of the integration with cloud applications, like number of clients are considering recruitment or talent management, those kinds of things in the cloud first, and then depends on the success and adoption, moving more and more to the cloud. So it's a good interim step, especially for organizations that have mandates to maintain their own data centers or their own control over their data. So those are some of the functional benefits. There's also a lot of mobile and mobile service and so forth that I won't have time to get in today, but it's a better user experience. So you'll see more HTML pages versus the the legacy forms. that 11i and then more has, was kind of built on and then moved on to the 12 platform. So you've seen that transition, and now it's going to accelerate further, right? So easy to use, light footprint kind of capabilities that exist in the modern platform. So similar to the Oracle ERP Cloud look and feel, in my mind when I compare the two. So it's a good way to gently, get customers to a modern platform without having to completely lift and shift to the cloud. And there are significant operational efficiencies, and that's really what I want to focus on today, because functional and overall UI changes, while they're really important, they don't impact as much the decision to move as does the operational efficiency, in my mind, what our customers are telling me. So from that standpoint, online patching is the big one. You've all heard about it, and I'll dig into it a little bit. There's tons of benefits with online patching. You don't have to have as much downtime. You can keep running your environment and patch up, but you do have to prepare for that, and you do have to upgrade some middleware and so forth. So application management and cost of managing the application goes down. You can improve your testing as a result of that, and also modernize your IT infrastructure as part of this process. So there's tons of benefits of moving to 12.2 beyond just the supported platform. And what our clients are telling us is, in terms of just business patching, online patching, it enables continuity of business, right? So one of the things our business customers demand, or business users demand, is the ability to continuously, run the business as we are more global and more connected. So that's how we leverage this infrastructure. So what this does is basically enables us to, as I said before, enable users to continue operating in different time zones, etc., while you patch your applications. And downtime is really limited, right? So the amount of time it used to take, weekends and so forth, your DBAs will be happy. They can actually, work during peak hours where they're most productive. Also, it's more predictable, right? So you can manage your patching process. So our clients have really good SDLC controls or lifecycle management controls. Most of them are manual, unfortunately. So they have, monthly meetings or weekly meetings to decide what patches to put into the system, and what impact does that have. And that can really slow down. I'm middle of number of client discussions right now as year end is approaching. Many of our clients are going into a dark period where they don't really make any changes to the system for the risk of impacting financial reporting, right? So we have freezes on patches and so forth. So it makes it very difficult when a problem occurs during those windows. And so with 12.2, I think that makes it easier for you to deal with change and adopt a more agile approach to change management while maintaining those controls that are so important for financial reporting and overall reporting in operations and IT in general. So yeah, that's basically some of the benefits to consider. And once you consider these benefits, I think it makes a strong case to move forward. And that's why we're seeing in our conversations with 200 plus customers that they have either planned or they're starting to upgrade, depending on their appetite for cost and risk and so forth. So that's kind of where we are now. Just under the covers, I just wanted to share what's changed. And so this is an Oracle slide that was presented at Open World, and so I want to credit that. But you'll see that database, right? So let's start from right to left. So database support is for 11G, R2, of course, and it has significant benefits, right, in terms of scalability, portability, and tolerance. And so that's going to be the database. If you are taking on this journey, take a look at that database. But as you can see, the majority of the changes are in the middleware, and that's where WebLogic server and related JSP and listeners become part of the core technology for Oracle. These were optional, if you recall, in 12.1 and previous. You could use Tomcat and Many customers have already converted to WebLogic. Now, Oracle GRC, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, also supports WebLogic, but you have to make sure the versions are compatible, right? So that's the big change in that red middle rectangle. And that then enables you to build a more scalable model that you can roll out your applications for many other use cases or users, if you will, to really transform your business to more of a digital business, right? So that's the benefit you get by having a more robust and scalable middleware. So now let's take a look at GRC controls, which are also known as advanced controls. So if you look at some, articles from Oracle or Google it, you'll find advanced controls and GRC controls are interchangeable. So let's take a quick look on what those controls are at first. So these are basically application controls that automate some of the activities within eBusiness Suite to help you mitigate risks. So on the left square, you see application access controls, right? So this is probably the most popular product that was adopted by Oracle on-premise customers over the past 10 years, 10 or 12 years. And this enables you to find segregation of duty violations and other risks in your access and entitlements. And it's built on access entitlements, which I'll explain. So it basically helps you determine what users can do and so forth, right? So what type of transactions, activities they can perform. For example, can they create a supplier and pay a supplier? So potential risk that violates your segregation of duty policies. The next most popular product that was adopted by EBS customers, and we have had the opportunity to implement for many of them, is the configuration controls. Configuration controls enables you to maintain that change management process that's so important to safeguard the process integrity itself. We all know that the way the process flows through an application is based on how you configure that application. So for what I mean by that is, the three-way match is one of the parameters or controls that you have. So when you configure that in eBusiness Suite and you run your procure to pay cycle, and run the transactions, if the control is violated, in other words, invoice doesn't match the PO and receipts, you can automatically, or system will automatically put that on hold or require you to force approve that. Right, so that's a basic example, but configurations are very important for the integrity of the process. That's the main point. And many of our customers have implemented that also to streamline their change management process. For example, going from dev, test, and prod, they've used this capability to compare results between dev and test and prod, so that when they apply patches or when they upgrade, they run what's called the snapshot, right, before and after. It also supports continuous monitoring, so being able to see all changes to supplier bank accounts, because Oracle only records the last change through the record detail in the table, right? So this gives you that auditability without having to turn on the complete audit trail in the database, which is obviously very costly and impacts performance. You cannot put audit on transaction tables generally without losing significant performance. So this is a surgical tool, very popular. These two products were actually acquired by Oracle in around 2008. So it's been a long journey on that product, and it's seen its life, extended and so forth several times. Transaction control is probably less popular, but we do see a lot of customers still use it. It's metadata driven as well, like Configuration Monitor, and this looks for risky transactions or suspicious transactions, like similar invoice numbers, similar payment dates, and to identify duplicate payments, let's say. So that's a really helpful tool. We have some really good success with these tools. We worked with State of Pennsylvania here in the US and helped them save $30 million leveraging some of the capabilities and technology of big data that's behind transaction controls. And if you need to learn more, you can look at the webinars on our website that talk about this in much more detail. We do record these webinars, so if you want to share these with your colleagues, feel free to get that link from our website. Emma will put that out there. And then preventive control, this is, again, a real popular product in the early days before Oracle, especially on 11i platform, before Oracle had advanced capabilities around personalizations that were introduced in 12. The only drawback for this product is that it only works with the the legacy forms. It does not work with HTML, right? But where it works, it has significant advantages because it can basically put the transactions on hold, like duplicate invoices and so forth, and then send a workflow to an approver to review that anomaly in the system or transaction in the system, and then if the approval is granted, then the hold is released, right? So it's a very powerful tool, especially that flow capability or the approval capability that you can build into your application to really put preventive controls in the application and the process, which are much better than having to detect a risk and then remediate it, right? So if we can prevent the risk in the first place, that's much more powerful. But unfortunately, it only works on forms, and as we just saw with 12.2, we see less and less forms, right? So that becomes a challenge, which I'll talk about on the checklist in a few minutes. So these are the 4 products that most customers have adopted over the last 10 years, various degree, depending on their business risks and so forth. And we had the chance to help many of those customers implement. So this is a core competency and the expertise at SafePass that we possess. So let's take a look now what's happened since these products were introduced. So you can see on this is a note from Oracle support that I've inserted here. The source is Oracle support, and you'll see that these products, most of them came to general availability. GA stands for general availability back in over a decade ago, right? So without going through all the dates, you guys can see that this presentation will be made available online, so you can share that. As I said before, so the Premier support has ended some time ago, which is not alarming, but you can see that some of the newer releases, like Access Controls Governor, was in September 2016, is when the Premier support ended, and same thing with configuration controls, transaction controls. So the pieces that I've just talked about in the previous slide, most of them ended in September. The preventive control actually ended a little bit sooner, right? So that was 2015, and we saw a big drop in usage, but many customers, love it because of the benefits it provides, and they still continue to use it, or even, we're still implementing very few customers, but a couple of them are still implementing preventive controls. And there are some challenges, but what's happened since then is as these products have gone into the sustaining support now, which is where all of them are, the level of support from Oracle is limited to severity 1. So if you have a production system that is unable to operate, for example, your preventive control is not working, the approval workflow is not working, and it's impacting your business, Oracle will respond to a Sev 1. But there are, as you can see, no enhancements, right? So if you know Oracle support policy, there have been no enhancements for the past 3 years in any of these products, and 4 years for the case of preventive governor. There has been some patches. So if you want to know what patch levels you're at, which patch levels you should be, I'll take those kinds of questions at the end, and so we'll give you some more details. But yeah, so that's the concern that customers have today, that your EBS is supported till 2030 or beyond, but your GRC support has ended some 3 years ago, and the indefinite support is fairly limited. So let me take a look at, let me kind of explain how this also impacts your infrastructure first, because we talked about how EBS goes to a different middleware. So this is an example of access controls and transaction controls. They both sit on a separate environment, and basically the middleware or the application server required for that is WebLogic, which is good news, or it works with Tomcat, like I said. So one thing you want to do is when you go to the upgrade to 12.2 is to take a look at your infrastructure, right? And I'll talk about checklist next, but this is one of the pieces that I wanted to just highlight so you can think about how you will upgrade. This is a older version 8.6.3. There's a couple of new patches that's come in. This infrastructure that you have in place. So you want to make sure that your application server after the upgrade is also upgraded so that you can leverage the latest platform from Oracle, and same thing with database. So please take a look at the compatibility matrix from Oracle and make sure if you're using a database cluster that you don't get yourself in a position where your database for AACG and TCG no longer can work with your database cluster for EBS. So something to watch out for. And like I said, I'll cover these time in more detail in a minute. Now for configuration controls, it's got its own presentation layer, right? Just like AACG and TCG, and it has its own database. So again, the same considerations or assessments around infrastructure should take place. So just wanted to highlight that because many times people assume that these products somehow sit inside EBS, but they don't. They have their complete infrastructure. There's a cost of maintaining that infrastructure and making sure they're in the current levels. And you will have your DBAs come and tell you that, hey, can we leverage the clustering capabilities in the new database and put them all in one database? And I've helped customers clean up that mess because it doesn't work. The compatibility levels are different, right? So you have to ensure that you maintain that segregation within this infrastructure. Okay, so now let's jump into the meat of this whole discussion, which is, well, how do we start impact analysis before we do the upgrade? And hopefully this is the stuff you can take to your IT meetings and management meetings, audit meetings, etc., and start preparing before you start the upgrade. So that's the main purpose of this presentation. So let's take a look at AACG first. I pulled out an example from one of our training slides. So this is how you would set up a AACG process control, or sorry, a segregation of duty control. It's basically you pick a process like procure to pay, you identify a risk like creating a policy, which is on the right here. So create payments and create suppliers. So that basically says you don't want the same person to be able to create a payment, create a supplier and pay them, because that creates fraud risk, financial fraud risk, and also can create, other risks. For example, financial misstatement risk, which is very important to our clients. Now that policy is basically driven off these what we call entitlements, right? So creating a payment or creating a supplier is an entitlement which makes up the policy, and the entitlement is made up of these access points. So access points are, in most cases for Oracle eBusiness customers, are functions, right? So these functions like payment action, payment batch sets, payments are then mapped into these technical functions, right? So that's how you create a policy. And so if you're running AACG today, you have, let's say, 50 or 100 policies. They're based ultimately on these functions in Oracle R12.1. So now we have done the analysis. When you go to 12.2, you get hundreds of new functions. So clearly, one of the things we look for in audit, and your auditor will look for, is a completeness test. So they'll come back to you and say, well, even though you're running this control for 12.1, it no longer is effective for 12.2 because you have not done the full analysis of all the new entry points or access points that have been introduced in the modules for the sake of additional functionality, UI capabilities, and so forth. So let's say there's a new way now to be able to create a payment off a mobile device through a project. So you have people in the field that are, taking in payments, and you have a mobile device and that's a new function, right? And we talked about how mobile and IoT and all this other stuff is coming into the application. Well, it's coming in with new functionality. Functionality means new function. So if you've missed that, that means you're missing out on the risk. So you'll fail the completeness test for your audit. So be sure to go and review those and not just lift and shift these rule sets. And so that'll take some effort to get that right. And it'd be better to do it early on rather than wait for the auditors to bring in their auditors and find these kinds of issues, because remediation can be fairly costly and the reputational risk is associated with that too. So yeah, so the way you do that in AACG is you would go to these access points, like for example invoices, and look for what are the functions currently mapped to an access point, and which additional functions have been introduced to be able to do, for example, mobile invoices, right? So being able to search for all the invoice functions and then attach them. So be sure to do that exercise as soon as you have a 12.8, 12.2.8, or 12.2.9, whatever you're planning to upgrade to, or anything in the future, and make sure you update your entitlements, because Oracle is not going to provide you those entitlements. Okay. So that's checklist number one. Next, let's take a look at CCG. Again, a quick reminder, kind of a back to future session here, I feel like. So yeah, CCG basically is your snapshots, comparison, and change tracking, right? Those three key benefits you get, and it's all driven off metadata. So I mentioned functions so far, but metadata consists of essentially the tables or objects in eBusiness Suite. So if you do comparison of three-way match, which was the example I used earlier, basically what you're doing is you're looking at a three-way match object in your 12.1, comparing that with 12.2, or if you're tracking it, you're basically in 12.2, you're saying, okay, who changed it last? What was the previous value, last value, new value? So it's a very handy tool for doing upgrades and also, tracking changes. So that's what it does. So if you have that tool, one of the things you're going to have to do is take a look at the metadata. So depending on which modules you've enabled, for example, these are the three different applications that I can license here: 12.1, 12.03, and 12.11.5. So you'll notice that we don't have 12.2 support. So that's not going to be supported because of the fact that it's under sustained support. So if you want to use 12.2, you will have to build your own metadata, or take the chance that 12.1 objects hopefully are the same as 12.2. So maybe in certain areas you can get away with it, but for the majority of the areas where CCG works, you'll have to build your own objects from scratch, which can be fairly time consuming. We've done it for clients that have requested that of us, because Oracle, even in the 12.1 support, has really limited the objects to a few key modules. For example, inventory, fixed assets, and HR are common ones that are not available to 12.1 customers. And as you go to 12.2, you're on your own, right? So yeah, log an SR, log a ticket, confirm that with Oracle. I don't speak for Oracle, but that's what we're seeing in the market, that there is no objects certified with 12.2 yet, and I don't know of any plans that they'll be certified. So this module, which you relied on, and your auditors have relied on, would have to be updated or upgraded with building new objects and building what we call custom schemas. So for the 12.2 objects, if they've changed, or if you want to continue to monitor them, you got to use what's called a meta builder and build those objects. So that's the checklist item for CCG. Now I put PCG next. So PCG, just to remind everyone, is basically a set of rules. It's like having personalization on steroids, someone told me the other day. So it just improves the personalization capabilities. You can see that when you install PCG, if you have it installed and you have the right responsibility, which is I think called GRC Controls still, you'll be able to go in and you'll see this extra menu pop up in your screen. And then you'll be able to see all these items: prevent update, prevent insert, hide a field. So these are called form rules. There are 4 types of rules, and form rules is the popular one. Again, as I said earlier, it has always just worked on the legacy forms. It does not work on HTML forms or the newer JSP pages. So that's going to be the challenge. And what do you do if the system is shifted? Fortunately, it's not a new challenge for us. So when we migrated clients from 11i to 12, we faced the same challenge because, as you might know, many of the uh, procurement forms like supplier payments, all that had moved from legacy forms to JSP or HTML pages. So the way we did that for clients back in those days was to help them basically leverage the personalization that's introduced in 12.1 and help them do that. So we can help you assess that if you want us to do that for you, or you can take on that journey yourself with internal resources. But this is the capability that you will lose when the form becomes a HTML page. And we've done some analysis that we'll touch on in the end. So this is an example of an HTML page, and also the workflows, right? So now to do workflows, if you lose that form, you clearly can't do what's called a form event, which means that you have to build the workflow using the workflow developer, right? So if you have those resources in-house, you can leverage that, and that's always an option. It is, again, time consuming, just like CCG metadata. It's time consuming, but again, as part of your upgrade checklist, you may want to include those key workflows. Like, for example, if you're using, workflows for financial close, that's one of the most common uses for preventive controls governor, is to be able to do special approvals or multi-level approvals because the journal approval is not sufficient for your business, so you've customized it, or you're using PCG. So you could now leverage the the capability here if you can't do that in PCG. And that's kind of where I am with some of our clients right now, is we're helping them migrate their old workflows in 12.9 to modern workflows here. And then finally, the last piece is the transaction controls governor. Again, just like configuration controls governor, this one is based on objects. So the way this works is you have a business risk. For example, in your procure to pay cycle, you have unauthorized purchases, overpayments, or duplicate payments, those types of risks. And the way you address that risk is by setting up some control objectives like accurate supplier information, validation, and then you monitor those against those control objectives. And if those monitors fail, like somebody does split POs or purchase of unauthorized items, et cetera, you get incidents. So that's essentially what transaction controls does, but the way it monitors these controls is by having access to the database objects. And as we just talked about in 12.2, many of them have changed. And it's not that the whole object has changed, like supplier is still a supplier, but it has more attributes, right? So if the attributes are different than what the metadata is looking for, it'll fail. So that's the part that you need to focus on. It's not that you have a supplier's call vendor or something like that. It's not like Oracle's completely changed the underlying object name. It's the attributes that are changed to incorporate additional functionality. Okay. So this is an example of how it works. It traverses through business risk, goes to incidents, and is reported back and highlighted to the business. And from a functional standpoint, this is what a TCG screen looks like. So if you're using TCG, this would be very familiar to you. There's the data source, which will move from 12.1 to 12.2. And it uses ODI, by the way. So you may want to make sure that your ODI is at the correct level as well, so you don't lose the ETL capability, which is ETL is extract, translate, load. This is the Oracle product that's behind the scenes, which extracts the data from eBusiness Suite. And it's built on these objects. These are the objects that it's built on. So accounting calendar, accounting events, applications, just a generic example I put out there, asset books and so forth, asset calendar. So all of these objects essentially are then applied, drawn in from left to right. And this is where you get the view of the model logic, where you can then apply to an attribute some kind of model logic. Like in this example, we're saying an invoice over 10,000 that is greater than 10,000, has a currency US, and is so it'll filter out all those invoices that are over 10,000 and provide us the data. Very simple rule, just to demonstrate the point that it's all object driven. So these objects may have to be updated if the underlying tables, and you can see in this down here 378 objects. So Oracle has provided quite a few objects across key modules, financial modules specifically. that would have to be updated. So just like for CCG, you need to use this tool called metadata or meta builder for metadata. Here, Oracle used a third-party tool to build these objects, which we have helped our clients use to help build additional objects. And it's basically requires some Java knowledge to be able to build them, and so forth. So that's on TCG for the upgrade consideration. So let's take a look at a case study. A company that we're working with recently is the largest supplier of recycled materials in the U.S., headquartered in Charlotte. And they wanted to basically improve their security controls, configuration management controls, transaction. They were facing some issues in their current environments with GRC. And so we assessed their risks across different modules. And ultimately, so after some, doing the assessment, ultimately they made the decision to, instead of continue to use the current, limited access, because the cost of upgrading everything was significantly more, plus the ongoing maintenance, they moved their controls to our platform, which we maintain, so less risks and so forth. And it's the platform that's been certified, been reviewed by Gartner as one of the most complete platforms. So this is your upgrade path, right? So that's one of the ways you can move to a more completely supported rather platform with ongoing enhancements and so forth. So you can basically, what they did was export their rules from AACG, and we provide the import capability. So you can see that you can import the rules directly into SafePass. And that took us about a day. They had about 50 rules or so we completed that process within a day. And there's setups involved, so it took us a week or so to set everything up. And then once everything was lined up, we basically used the spreadsheet out of AACG to import here. And this is just one example of how the rule comes in. So the rule has similar information. Rule type this is all SafePass capability. Also, it has a different versioning. So it's got a little more capabilities. You can bring in entitlements. You can see this like entitlements you saw. They come in here nicely, map it. So it completely maps from AACG here. And until the end of this year, we're offering customers a complimentary upgrade. So there's no service fee. And then they're able to now see their data in a much more visual manner. So if you worked with the AACG, there's a lot of extraction and then spreadsheets and then manual reporting, and there's no BI unless you build something. So this has built-in BI dashboards, so you can see, for example, risk by key, highest risk by control, SOD control. You can see top 10 user responsibility violations, and you can build these on yourself. It's got a built-in BI capability. And then top 10 user violations, and each test you've run, what's been the analysis results, exceptions. So quite a bit of dashboard out of the box, plus like I said, you can add your own. So that's the benefit that the customer saw of upgrading to SafePass after trying to, considering to just kind of patch up the current application and rebuild all the rules. And by the way, the rule set that we have a controls catalog which already is compatible with 12.2.9. So that was one of the big benefits. Next, on the CCG side, as I mentioned, there are two benefits of CCG. So one is the snapshots, the other one is a change tracker. Well, three benefits in comparison, right? So for the snapshot, you're able to map your CCG snapshots into what we call monitor paths. And monitor paths basically has unlimited number of objects. So, we talked about CCG having limitation on objects only for certain financial modules and not supported for 12.2. You'll have to recreate all that metadata. Well, we have already built all the metadata under for 12.2 and beyond for CCG migration. So you can upgrade this from CCG to monitor paths, and you will have the same controls you already have compatible with 12.2, and that takes about a couple of weeks to do the mapping because you also want to do some testing and training and so forth. But it's a pretty simple process. You can see all these objects just like you saw in CCG. listed here. Also, there are transaction objects, so it's also like transaction objects, change tracker objects. So if you take a look at change tracker objects, that's next. So you can start tracking changes. In this case, you can see when someone changes a approval required, right? So it's after the change, before the change, after the change. So that change tracking capability that you have in CCG, you'll be able to lift and shift that here. And this way you won't lose your controls when you upgrade to 12.2. And then tracking multiple objects. So this is an enhancement. So one thing that I mentioned is, these products, because they're in indefinite sustaining support, they don't have any enhancements since 2016, but customers have asked us for these enhancements. For example, supplier tracking, right? So supplier information is more complex than a simple table in CCG. You want to be able to take 10 different supplier tables and really extract out the 5 or 10 significant risks. You don't want to know all about 300 different attributes every day. What you want to know about is bank account changes, supplier name or tax ID, and those kinds of things. So now we have the ability to do multi-objects, consolidated multi-object change tracking capability. So that'll reduce the amount of reports you have to look at or business users have to look at, because they can go right to a report where they can focus on those attributes that are relevant to the risk, as opposed to hundreds of different reports they have to go through in some cases with CCG. So that's an enhancement on what they have today. Now for process controls, I mentioned workflow was one of the key capabilities in PCG, and that's the module that's probably affected the most with 12.2. As I mentioned, Oracle already didn't support a bunch of, Oracle doesn't only works on legacy forms, and as those forms are going away, so is your preventive controls through process paths you can implement, right? So what process paths does, it's the migration from PCG workflows to process path workflows. And you can see that these are point and click process works. So you can create basically a workflow. This is an example of financial close. So you can define a template of your dependencies yourself. So it's a little bit easier than having to build workflows and having a bunch of developers and IT folks do that. So you're able to basically define a template on how things are supposed to flow, assign task owners to it, and then automate that using templates. And this workflow will then replace the, let's say, an approval workflow in your financial close process. So this is an example of a financial close where we're closing different parts of the world. So in America, as our month-end close, we start with a revenue account analysis, balance sheet analysis, and they can be multi-level. So it's unlimited how many levels you go down. I've just got a couple of levels here just for the demonstration purposes. And then the end user can see this in their dashboard on what steps, what checklist they need to complete in order to close the books for their piece of the close process. And it provides you modern dashboard just like the one I showed you. So the visibility is much more visual and modern, as opposed to what you might see in the old Oracle reports, which is okay, but most of the modern users find that difficult to read and challenging without any drill downs or graphic capabilities. So it's a very challenging task, but if you move to this process, it takes, again, a couple of weeks to point and click and reset your workflows here, do some testing, and then roll it out another couple of weeks. So last but not least, the transaction monitoring. I wanted to touch on that. So transaction monitoring is where I give you an example of duplicate payments or invoices. So this is the same kind of transaction monitoring, migration of those objects from or upgrade of those objects from TCG, Transaction Control Governor, to SafePass. And so what they did in this case was leverage our duplicate. These are already pre-built objects. Metadata has been rebuilt for 12.2. And then basically once you complete the mapping, you're able to get the same kind of results. So again, you haven't lost any control. You continue to have controls in 12.2 without having to build all that metadata yourself. There are about 300, 400 different objects that you'll have to build maximum, or depending on how many controls you have. So this will help you lift and shift from the environment that you're no longer supporting, and reduce a significant amount of your implementation, upgrade costs, and maintain your controls. So that's pretty much all I had for today's topic. Hopefully this was useful. I'll turn it back over to Emma. Emma, if you just want to provide some information, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, okay, we have had
questions. Yeah.
Yes, we have had a couple of questions come in actually. First question, how long does it take to assess the GRC upgrade for 12.2?
So what's the question again? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
How long does it take to assess the GRC upgrade for 12.2?
Oh, the assessment, yeah. So, what we do is we have done the analysis already because a number of our customers have gone through that, like the case study I just shared. So what we have done is analyze the functions, the objects, and the forms. Those are the three elements of that checklist that I shared with you. And so that took us about a couple of weeks to go through end to end everything and prepare a report and provide, the roadmap. So if you're interested in us doing it for you, we can probably do it in a week or two, depending on how complex and how much you're using. But it's not a significant effort or cost. It's definitely something I would propose to those customers that are relying on the controls for their business and audit, because you will have an impact on those controls as you upgrade. Anything else?
How can we get details on EBS function and objects difference between 12.1 and 12.2?
Well, I just mentioned that. So we do have a list for the standard Vision instance, which is the demo instance from Oracle. You may have some custom functions. Of course, we don't know anything about that. But if you want just a generic list, please reach out to Emma, and we can have one of our team members provide you a detailed list in a spreadsheet where you can see and get a ballpark idea of what your effort level would be for updating AACG rules, updating the objects for CCG, TCG, and then workflows that you'll have to rebuild for preventive controls.
That's great. Well, I think that more or less wraps it up for today. So if you do have any further questions, then please contact myself. My email is there on the screen. You can check out our website to see our next events, and all the resources that we have on our website are available for download. So you can also reach us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course online at safepass.com. So thanks everybody for attending, and we hope to see you at our webinar in December. That will be December 18th.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.